This brings us to the Second Amendment. Now, this amendment, many people feel, protects your right to own a gun. Originally, it was only meant to apply to colonial armies. Now, however, the Supreme Court and many other courts have upheld that the Second Amendment really protects your right to have a weapon. Many controversies have emerged over the interpretation of the Second Amendment, and as such, the Second Amendment remains one of our most contestable and debatable amendments in the Bill of Rights. Unlike the Third Amendment, the Third Amendment we really actually no longer use. The Third Amendment states that governments cannot quarter, which means house, soldiers in your house during peacetime. This was a practice during the time when the revolution was fought, that the government would just send some soldiers to your house and they would live with you, and you'd have to pay them and put them in a bed and everything. Now, with modern military might, we don't do that anymore anyhow. So the Third Amendment is the only one of the initial Bill of Rights that we no longer really use. Bringing us to the Fourth Amendment. Now, the Fourth Amendment is extraordinarily important. It is your protection against unreasonable search and seizure. This means that the government cannot search your home, your possessions, including your car, your person, which means you and your belongings, your bag, without a cause. From the Fourth Amendment and the Ninth Amendment, we have taken our right to privacy. Pardon me. People talk about the right to privacy. That's not really in the Constitution as such. Rather, it has been interpreted to be a constitutionally protected right based on the Fourth and Ninth Amendments. Now, to be lawful, a search or an arrest must be based on what is known as probable cause. The police cannot just walk around the street arresting people left and right, picking them up, putting them in handcuffs, putting them in jail, and just hoping they might be guilty of something. Rather, the police have to show a court that they have a good reason to search a house, and then they get what is known as a search warrant. The search warrant is what allows the police to enter someone's home and search it for whatever contraband they might be looking for. Contraband is just another word for illegal materials. Oftentimes it's drugs, sometimes it's guns, sometimes it's people, sometimes it's other things. Now, there are some exemptions from this that you should be aware of. First, and most importantly, if the police see that a crime is being committed, they can search the property, the car, your person, what have you. So if you are walking down the street smoking marijuana, the police can search you. You have broken the law as it currently stands. They can stop you and search you. If the police are walking by your house and you have obviously underage people out on the front lawn drinking alcohol, they can search the house. You have just allowed them to enter the property because they have seen a crime being committed. The police can search garbage placed outside of a home. So if you have put your garbage in a dumpster or on a tree lawn, they can search through that. And if they find evidence inside of that garbage, evidence of drug use, for example, evidence of underage drinking, for example, they can use that evidence against you. And lastly, and this is a newer interpretation of the Fourth Amendment, is that employees of various companies and the government can be required to submit to a drug test. Generally, this is a urine or hair analysis to determine whether those employees have ingested illegal drugs in a certain time period. Your employer nor the government has to get a warrant to do this. Now, if for some reason the police search a car or a home or a person illegally without a warrant or without probable cause, that evidence cannot be used in court. Now, the exception here is that if the evidence was illegally obtained, it can be used if the attorney, the prosecuting attorney, can show that the evidence would have eventually been discovered anyhow. But in general, any illegally obtained evidence cannot be used against you. The police can search cars if they have probable cause to believe contraband is concealed. Now, here's where things get very tricky. You speeding 10 miles an hour over the highway, you speeding down the highway 10 miles an hour over the limit is not enough reason for them to stop your car and search it. Now, you weaving back and forth over the yellow and white lines on the highway, that is evidence that you may be intoxicated, and then they may be entitled to search your car. But speeding, running a red light, general traffic kind of activities, that's not enough for the police to stop your car and search your car. So you need to be aware of your rights, and if a police or other authority is going to abuse them, you need to tell them that you understand how the Fourth Amendment works and that you refuse to consent to a search without a search warrant. Now, your Fourth Amendment protections are severely limited in high school. I'm very sorry to tell you this, but inside of the school, you have way fewer constitutional protections. You can be searched by school personnel, and they have way fewer restrictions than police. They don't even need probable cause. The school authorities, and the Supreme Court has upheld this, school authorities can just stop you and search you. They don't need to show anyone that they have any reason to search you. You can just be searched. That may upset you, but that is what the Supreme Court has ruled. Furthermore, student athletes can be drug tested without any kind of search warrant. The student body in general cannot, but student athletes can be drug tested, and the results of those drug tests can be used in disciplinary action against those students. Now, another thing that the Fourth Amendment prohibits is wiretapping. Wiretapping is when the government listens in on your phone calls, reads your emails, your text messages, etc. The government must have a warrant issued by a court to get access to your phone records or your emails. There are some exceptions to this now with the Patriot Act in the Department of Homeland Security, that if you are suspected of being a terrorist, they may not actually need a warrant, or they can get a warrant from a secret court. But in general, the Fourth Amendment protects your right to have conversations with other people, even if those conversations are unseemly, unpleasant, or deal with potentially illegal things. Question: are the following scenarios constitutional? Take a look at those two scenarios, read through them, and then determine whether or not those are constitutionally protected actions that were taken inside of the scenarios. Pause the video, take a few moments, and answer that, please. This brings us to the Fifth Amendment. Now, the Fifth Amendment contains a series of protections, and these protections are for people who are accused of crimes. Note, I did not say that these are protections necessarily for criminals. Rather, these are your protections if you are ever accused of a crime, whether you have done it or not. This is the first step in protecting you from the government just taking you and putting you in prison. To begin with, before a person can be brought to trial, the charges against you must be decided on by a grand jury. A grand jury will then indict you, which means accuse you of a crime, and if they find that there is enough evidence, your trial will go ahead. If the grand jury finds that there is not enough evidence for your trial to go ahead, they will throw the case out and you will be cleared of all charges. What this does is it protects accused people from hasty government action. The Fifth Amendment further protects you from self-incrimination. Self-incrimination is when you have to testify against yourself. If you've ever heard someone say, "I plead the Fifth," that's what they're saying. They're saying, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right to not have to say anything that might get me in trouble. So if you have committed a crime and no one else saw you do it, and there's no other evidence that demonstrates that you committed that crime, if the government asks you, did you do it? Instead of saying yes or no, you would just say, I plead the Fifth. Meaning you, the government, you have to plead your case better than just asking me whether or not I did. The Fifth Amendment further protects you against double jeopardy, which means being tried twice for the same crime. So if you go out and murder someone, or you're accused of murdering someone, and then you are found not guilty, they cannot bring that same murder charge back against you later just to try it all over again and see if they can make you look like you actually did it. After you are cleared of a charge, you are cleared of a charge forever. You cannot be tried twice for the same crime. The Fifth Amendment guarantees you that you cannot be denied your life, liberty, or property without what is known as due process of law. Due process means that you have been given the opportunity to have your charges read, have a judge evaluate your case, have a jury evaluate your case. The law has to be fairly applied before you can be denied your life, your liberty, or your property. Due process is very, very important. It means that everyone has a right to a fair legal trial that will help to either establish whether they are guilty or innocent. The final clause of the Fifth Amendment guarantees all Americans the right to own private property. This basically means that if you own something, you own it outright. Now, the government can take private property, but only in very rare circumstances. So in a process called eminent domain, the government can take your stuff if the government can show that by doing so, it is furthering some public use. So for example, if for some reason the government wants to build a road and your backyard just happens to be where this road is going to go, they can take your backyard and turn it into the road. Now, they have to pay you for it, but they can just take it. Now, this is not done very frequently, but it does occasionally happen. Question 8. Explain your protections that are given to you under the Fifth Amendment. Take a moment, pause the video, answer the question, and then when you're ready, resume. The Sixth Amendment guarantees a person the right to trial by jury in a criminal case. If you are accused of a criminal activity, you have the right to hear witnesses, you have the right to question witnesses, and you have the right to call witnesses on your behalf, all in an effort to help you have the power to prove that you are innocent. It also guarantees you, or an accused person, the right to have a lawyer. Not only do you have to have a lawyer, the Supreme Court has gone on later to rule the lawyer must be free if you are poor, and the lawyer must be competent. Now, how competent a lawyer is and how good of a defense you'll get is another issue, but everyone has the right to a lawyer because the legal system is complicated, and if you don't understand it, you might lose your case simply by not knowing what's going on. So everyone has the right to a lawyer. You are also guaranteed a speedy trial. So your trial cannot drag on for years upon years upon years. Instead, your trial is supposed to move with some swiftness through the legal system. Now, I will tell you, the legal system is very, very, very slow. But even then, your trial should always be moving through, even if it seems like it's moving very slowly. Also, if you have a jury trial, your jury should be of your peers, meaning the jury that is selected for your trial should be people that are kind of like you, and they should be impartial. Impartiality is very important, and it becomes very difficult to always develop, especially in cases that are very controversial. I'll direct your attention to the Trayvon Martin case, the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman case from just a few years ago. In that case, when they were looking around for jurors, everyone had heard of that case. So when they sat people down to ask, can you be impartial? Many people had already formed an opinion of what they thought was true or untrue. So many jurors got excluded because they just came right out and said, I've already made up my mind, and I think George Zimmerman is either guilty or not guilty. So impartiality can be very difficult. The Seventh Amendment extends this right to trial by jury to what is called a civil case. A civil case is not a criminal case, but rather a conflict over money or property. As you could probably guess, most civil cases are things like divorces, custody disputes between divorced parents, fights over the will after a person dies, things like that. So the Seventh Amendment says you may also have a jury try your civil case, and that has a different set of legal rules. Furthermore, after your civil case is settled, it cannot be tried again in another court. So just like the Fifth Amendment protects you from double jeopardy in a criminal case, the Seventh Amendment protects you against double jeopardy in a civil case. All right, question 9. Explain your rights as guaranteed by the Sixth and Seventh Amendments. Take a moment, answer, pause the video, and when you're ready, resume again. Moving on to the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment says that courts cannot set bail that is excessive. Now, for those of you who don't know, bail is money that an accused person gives to the court to hold. In exchange, they are let out of jail until their trial. This is supposed to serve as a guarantee that if you're accused of a crime, you'll show up for your trial. You won't just flee the country or flee the state or what have you. Then after your trial, the bail is returned. The Eighth Amendment says that courts cannot set bail that is excessive. Now, excessive here is open to interpretation, but generally the bail amount should be something that you or your family could put up in order to free you from jail so that you could better prepare your legal defense. The Eighth Amendment, and probably the most important element of the Eighth Amendment, prohibits what is called cruel and unusual punishment. Cruel and unusual punishment is wildly open to interpretation, but generally this prohibits things like beating prisoners, torture, things of that nature. Now, some people have said that the death penalty is a cruel and unusual punishment, and that's where we get our question 10. Tell me, do you think the death penalty is cruel and unusual, and should it be banned under the Eighth Amendment? Moving on. The Ninth Amendment implies that people enjoy other rights not listed in the Constitution. This is very important. This means that Just because the Constitution doesn't say you have the right to do something, you have that right. If the Constitution does not say you cannot do this, then you can. That's a very, very broad, very, very important amendment. This means that any right or freedom you may want later on as the country develops, any right or freedom the people may want, they have, just automatically. Because unless it's prohibited by the Constitution, it is given to the people. This allows the Supreme Court to expand the rights of the people over time. A very important but very controversial application of the Ninth Amendment is the protection of abortion rights. In a landmark Supreme Court case called Roe v. Wade in 1973, the Supreme Court found that the Ninth Amendment extends to things such as abortion rights. The Constitution says nothing about abortion, and actually at the time of the Founding Fathers, abortion really had a different kind of social meaning to a lot of people. So the original Founding Fathers probably never thought about it. But we have applied the Ninth Amendment and extended it to protect things like abortion rights, people's right to privacy on the internet, things like this. The Ninth Amendment really has a lot of power behind it because it is open-ended, and anything can eventually be included into the Ninth Amendment. The 10th Amendment establishes and reinforces the federal system of divided power. This is a rarely used amendment. Basically, the 10th Amendment is redundant. The Constitution already sets up our federal system where there's a national government, known as the federal government, and a state government, and the federal and state governments under Article 5 of the Constitution have to get along with each other in a certain way. The 10th Amendment basically just says that powers not given to the federal government must be given to the states or the people. This is not very frequently used. Sometimes states will sue the federal government under the 10th Amendment in order to gain some power or some rights or some money or something, but these attempts are very rarely successful. Like I said earlier, the 10th Amendment's main focus is that the powers not given to the federal government nor forbidden to the states are reserved for the states or the people. This furthers the protections of the Ninth Amendment and solidifies the power of the people as being something that can grow and grow over time. Question 11. Explain the 9th and 10th Amendments. Pause the video and do that right now. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I have certainly enjoyed making it, and I'll see you in class.